Hello! Welcome to Mario Kart Tour 101. Today we're going to talk about how the scoring system works in Mario Kart Tour. This video is designed for new to intermediate players or anyone who just wants to take a look under the hood and learn more about how Mario Kart Tour calculates your race score. All of the information in this video is public knowledge. You can read about it in the Mario Wiki or in the in-game FAQ, but I hope to be able to present it in a way that's more relatable and that helps you understand how you can use it to your advantage in Mario Kart Tour. With that being said, let's-a go! We're going to start with an overview of the three types of points that you can score during a race. The first are called base points. These are the points that you see on the driver, kart, and glider selection screen, and they're added to your score at the starting line before you begin the race. But they also factor into another calculation later on, so they can have more of an impact than you may at first realize. The second type of points are called bonus points, and you can think of these as action points because they're the points you get for performing actions during a race. The more actions you perform, the more bonus points you can earn. Every action has a certain number of bonus points associated with it, such as 5 points for a coin action or 20 points for a jump boost, and these are the points the game's talking about when you see language such as bonus points times 2 on your kart selection screen, or times 1.15 to all bonus points earned in your kart profile. Now you can also earn bonuses for keeping combo and for your kart and glider special skills, but those are not included in what's being multiplied. The only thing being multiplied times 2 or times 1.15 is the specific number of points associated with each action. There's a chart showing how many points each action is worth, and we'll look at that later on in the video. The third type of points are called position points, and you can think of these as finish points because they're the points that you get when you cross the finish line at the end of the race. Now, I'm at level 190, so for a first place finish, I would score 6,400 points. Now, you may sometimes notice that the position points you earn seem to be a lot more than what you're entitled to based on your current player level, and that's because of something that we haven't discussed yet called the bonus points boost. So let's talk about the bonus points boost. Bonus points boost is one of the most commonly misunderstood aspects of the scoring system, or at least I found it difficult to understand when I started playing, because usually when you see the words bonus points boost written in the game, it doesn't explain exactly what that is or when it applies. So you might think to yourself, okay, bonus points sounds really similar to bonus points boost. Are they the same thing? And spoiler alert, they're not. They sound similar, but bonus points boost is actually a completely different calculation. And you might also see things like times 2 bonus points boost, times 3 bonus points boost, and think, okay, if I level up my driver, kart, or glider to that level, I'm automatically going to get the bonus points boost. But in actuality, you only get the bonus points boost when you're using the driver, kart, or glider on one of their favorite courses, or in other words, that driver, kart, or glider shows up on the top shelf of that course selection screen. So that's kind of explained in the fine print, but you may not realize that when you start playing the game. The bonus points boost is in some sense a fourth aspect of your score, because it's shown as a separate line item on the scoring summary at the end of the race. But it's actually already added in to the bonus points and the position points that you get during the race, so it's included in the score that you see when you cross the finish line. And the bonus points boost depends on your driver, kart, and glider's levels and their base points, so it's actually related to all three of the elements of scoring that we talked about earlier. Remember, the bonus points boost is only going to be earned by top shelf drivers, karts, or gliders. It took me a while to realize that when I started playing. And only if those drivers, karts, or gliders are level 2 or above, because at level 2 you get a one-time bonus points boost, and so on. The other thing to note about bonus points boost is it only applies to the first 200 actions in the race. Meaning on a long track, if you can perform more than 200 actions, only the first 200 are going to have a bonus points boost added to them, and the remainder are not. But it doesn't matter what actions you perform in what order. As long as you perform 200 actions, you have maxed out your bonus points boost, and if you perform less than that, then every action will receive a bonus points boost. There's a simple formula for calculating bonus points boost, and that is the points per action is going to equal the level of your driver, kart, or glider minus 1, and that's because a level 2 driver, kart, or glider gets a one-time bonus points boost, at level 3 it gets a 2 times bonus points boost, and so on. So level minus 1 times the base points over 100. So for the example of a level 4 high-end driver with 800 base points, the bonus points boost per action would be 3, which is the level -1, times 8, which is the base points over 100, which multiplies to 24 points per action of bonus points boost. And then for the kart and glider, if they're level 3 with 400 base points, then you take 2, which is the level -1, times 4, which is the base points over 100, giving you 8 points per action for using the kart, and another 8 points per action for using the glider. So your total bonus points boost with this setup would be 24 plus 8 plus 8, which adds up to 40 points per action of bonus points boost. Now remember, the bonus points boost is added in to the bonus points and the position points that you see during the race. So half of it, or in other words, 20 points per action, are going to be added to each action during the race, and the other half, or the other 20 points for each action, are going to be added at the finish line, assuming I finish in first place, and there's a reduced value if you finish in 2nd through 8th. Now this formula is actually very helpful if you want to decide whether you should upgrade a driver, kart, or glider to use on a certain course. So for example, let's say you want to score an extra 1,000 points in your ranked cup, and you want to estimate how many points you could gain by upgrading Pauline, the high-end driver shown here, from level 4 to level 5. Well, at level 5, her new bonus points boost per action would be 4, which is her new level -1, times 8, the base point component, and that multiplies to 32 points per action. So that would be an improvement of 8 points per action over her current bonus points boost. And if you know you can perform somewhere between 150 and 200 actions in that race, that could give you between 1,200 and 1,600 extra points. So yes, you would be able to make up the 1,000 point difference for your ranked cup if you had a similar race with Pauline at a higher level. You might also wonder, would it be better to uncap her and raise the base points to 980? So at level 4, but with 980 base points, the bonus points boost per action would be 3, which is her level -1, times 9.8, which would be the new base points divided by 100. And 3 times 9.8 is a little less than 30. It's 29.4. So that would only be an improvement of 5.4 points per action in bonus points boost. And at 150 to 200 actions for that race, that might only be like 800 to 1,000 or slightly more than 1,000 extra points, so it's tight. If you really want to be sure of making that gain in your ranked cup, you may want to go with the level 5 improvement. And then again, you might need more points, and you could ask, what if I increased her to level 5 and used the points cap ticket and raised her base points to 980? Well then, the new bonus points boost would be 4, which is her new level -1, times 9.8, which is her new base points divided by 100, and that multiplies to just under 40. That would be 39.2 points per action, which is an increase of about 15 points per action over her current bonus points boost. So if you perform the maximum of 200 actions in a race, you can perform more than 200 actions, but only the first 200 get the bonus points boost. 200 times 15 is like 3,000 points, which is a huge improvement. So you could get a big improvement in your score if you're willing to make that investment. So this formula is actually very helpful in deciding whether or not you should upgrade a driver, kart, or glider, and what the benefit would be by doing so. And it's just an easy way, if you like numbers like I do, that you can figure that out in your head before going into the race and investing those resources. Now that we've had an overview of how the scoring system works, let's take a closer look at base points, bonus points, and position points. But first, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like the video and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to know about that you think would make a good, informative Mario Kart Tour video. All right, here we go. First, let's look at the base points for your drivers, karts, and gliders. Base points are added up at the start of the race, and the total can be anywhere between 800 base points if you're using all brand new normal items, up to 2,800 base points if you're using all high ends that have been triple capped, which means you've used a total of 16 cap tickets on each item to raise the base point limit 3 times. One thing to note, since Mii suits have recently been introduced to the game, is that when you use Mii suits, your base points can be slightly higher because you get an extra 10 base points for each additional Mii suit that you own. So you'll see the base points for your driver, kart, and glider added up at the start of the race, but remember they also factor into the bonus point boost that I described earlier, so they can have a huge impact on your score when you reach high levels in the game. And that's also the reason why it's so important to maximize your base points when possible. You can raise the base points for each driver, kart, and glider simply by racing with them, or by using orange point boost tickets that you'll find in the shop and tour gifts. But there's a limit to how many base points each item can have. For normal drivers, the limit is 600 base points, and for karts and gliders, it's 300 base points each. So that would give you a total of 1,200 base points on the starting line if you used all normal items that are maxed out to their limit. But as I mentioned before, it's possible to raise the limit using points cap tickets, and you can do that up to 3 times. If you triple cap your normal drivers, they can then have up to 760 base points, and for triple capped normal karts and gliders, they can have up to 380 for a total of 1,520 base points if you use the triple capped normal set shown here. Super drivers, karts, and gliders have higher base point limits. A super driver can have up to 675 base points, and super karts and gliders can have up to 330 each, which would give you a total of 1,335 base points using a maxed out super set. But if you use points cap tickets to then raise those limits, once you've triple capped your super drivers, they can actually have up to 975 base points, and the maximum for triple capped karts and gliders would be 450 each. So with a fully triple capped super set, you can have 1,875 base points on the starting line. And usually you'll use some mix of supers, normals, and high ends, and you may not have all of them triple capped, but these numbers are just to give you an idea of the range of base points that are possible with each set of items. For high-end items, the limits are even higher, and since high-end tickets are so valuable, I'm going to go through all the levels of uncapping. Initially, a high-end driver will max out at 800 base points, while karts and gliders will max out at 400 base points each. That gives you a total of 1,600 points on the starting line with a high-end set, which is already more than the 1,520 from the triple capped normal set. So you can see that using high-end items gives you a really good way to increase your race scores by increasing the base points. If you single cap a high-end driver using a single points cap ticket, you can raise their base points up to 980, and for karts and gliders, a single cap can raise the base points up to 490, meaning with a single capped high-end set, you'd have 1,960 base points at the start of the race. If you double cap a high-end driver by spending an additional 5 points cap tickets, you can raise their base points up to 1190, and if you double cap a high-end kart or glider, you can raise the base points to 595, giving you a total of 2,380 base points on the starting line with a double capped high-end set. And if you triple cap a high-end driver, which takes an additional 10 point cap tickets, which is a lot, you can raise their base points to 1,400. And for triple capping a kart or a glider, you can raise their base points to 700 each. Now, I don't even have a triple capped high-end glider, so I made this image look as if the strawberry donut was triple capped. But if you do have a full triple capped high-end set, that's when your base points can be 2,800 points, which is the maximum without Mii suits. Remember, with Mii suits, they can actually go higher than 1,400 if you triple cap them, because Mii suits get an additional 10 base points for each additional Mii suit that you own in your inventory. And remember also that the base points are not just added at the start of the race, but they also factor into the bonus point boost calculation, so it's very important to raise your base points if you want to get higher scores. Alright, that was base points. Let's talk about the second component of the race score, bonus points. These are the action points you receive for each action you perform during the race. You ready? Because might be a lot to take in. This is a chart of all the starting values of bonus points for each action you can perform in a race. So you can see things like a coin action or a mini turbo are worth 5 points each. You can see a mushroom, a glide time, a dash panel are each worth 10 points. Super mini turbos there at 15, and it goes up from there. You can see driver special items, and several of the driver specific items, such as the Yoshi egg, Bowser shell, fire and ice flowers, have recently had their bonus points increased as a result of the latest update. That's to try to balance them with more powerful special skills for scoring, such as Coin Box and Giant Banana. So you can see here a mushroom cannon is now worth 30 points. Triple mushrooms are worth 15, which is more than a single mushroom if you're using a driver that has either of those special skills. You can see track obstacles. Obstacles, for listed as 10 points, represent anything you can run into on the track to score points, such as a snow person, for example. The half pipe will give you points, and if you do a special trick, you can get a second action that's worth even more points on the half pipe. That's if you approach it at a really high angle and you shoot high enough into the air. Payback is when you hit an opponent with an item that opponent had hit you earlier on in the race. Smash is if you run over someone that has been shrunk due to lightning. And you can even see on here things like evading a spiny shell using a mushroom, 50 points. You can see destroying a spiny shell or repelling a blooper with your super horn is going to be 100 points, so that's quite a bit. Frenzy finish is if you finish the race while you still have a frenzy going, so you didn't get to get all the actions from that frenzy, but kind of as a consolation, you get a frenzy finish action with a value of 100 points. And you can see 1st through 8th are the points that you get for crossing the finish line to start a new lap. Not for finishing the race, but every time you start a new lap, you're going to score a certain amount of points, and the higher you are in position, the more points you're going to get for that action. And then you see things like traffic cone and frenzy action listed at 1 point. And you might think to yourself, if that's only worth 1 point, why is it important? Why would anyone ever go out of their way to hit a traffic cone? Or why are the frenzy actions that you see pop up important? And the answer is, they're not worth just 1 point. They're actually worth more than that, because these are just the starting values for each action, and they're going to be modified not only by what cart you're using, but by bonuses for keeping combos and for your kart and glider special skills. So let's look at what happens to these starting values when the game calculates your score. The first thing the game does when you perform an action is it takes the starting value for that action and multiplies it by a certain amount based on what cart you're using on that track. And so you can see here, bonus points times 2 times 1.5 or times 1 corresponds to which shelf your cart is on when you select it from the cart selection screen. If you're racing on a favorite course for that cart, which means it's on the top shelf, the bonus points starting values are all multiplied by 2. With a mid-shelf cart, they'd be multiplied by 1.5, and with a bottom shelf cart, they would not be multiplied. Multiplying by 1 doesn't change the value. So that's why it's useful to use top shelf carts, because there's a times 2 multiplier to the starting values for each action. And then if you look in your cart profiles, you'll see something like times 1.1 or times 1.15 to all bonus points earned, depending on the level and rarity of your cart. This example, times 1.15, would be for a level 3 high-end cart. So let's look at how that applies in practice. If I was using the level 3 head honcho, which is a high-end cart, and it was top shelf, or I was racing on one of its favorite courses, then the coin, which has a starting value of 5 bonus points, would actually be multiplied times 2.3. That's because it's multiplied times 2 for the shelf bonus and times 1.15 for the cart's level bonus. And 2 times 1.15 is 2.3. So the overall multiplier for this cart is 2.3. 5 multiplied times 2.3 is 11.5. Therefore, the coin is not worth 5 points in this race, but it's actually worth 11.5. Similarly, a jump boost, which has a starting value of 20 points, would be multiplied times 2.3 if I was using this cart on one of its favorite courses. And 20 times 2.3 is 46. So you can start to see this is how actions can become worth a lot more than simply what they're listed at in the table. So That's the only thing that gets affected by the kart multiplier. But the calculation's not done, because there are going to be some bonuses added on top of that. The first thing that gets added on is a combo bonus. So that's based on the shelf of your glider that you're using. If you're using a top shelf glider, you can see combo bonus times 3 when you go to the glider selection screen. With a middle shelf glider, it would be combo bonus times 2, and with a bottom shelf glider, combo bonus times 1. So these are bonus points that are added to each action in a combo, meaning you perform the actions one after the other before the combo time expires. They increase the value of the combo bonus for the first 15 actions as part of a combo. So for the first action, you're not going to get any bonus because it's just one action by itself is not a combo. But then the next action, you're going to get a small bonus, and it's going to increase 15 times until it reaches a cap of 45 points added on to each action if you're using a top shelf glider, 30 points added to each action if you're using a middle shelf glider, and 15 points added if you're using a bottom shelf glider. And that's independent of the rarity or the level of your glider. It just depends on if it's top, middle, or bottom shelf. So it's always better to use a top shelf glider to maximize your combo bonus, even if it's a normal glider or a super glider or a low level glider, but you still want to use that top shelf glider instead of a middle shelf glider, because with the top shelf glider, you're going to have the maximum possible combo bonus added to each action. Another thing I should say is that these values apply to racing at 150cc. If you race at 50 or 100cc, then the combo bonus only increases for the first 5 or 10 actions instead of 15, so that would end you with a lower cap, and you wouldn't get as many points. That's the main reason why it's important to race at 150cc to earn high scores, because you won't score nearly as high with the lower combo bonus you get at 50 or 100cc. And if you race at 200cc, the game treats it as 150, so it's usually better to race at 150 when you want to score high scores, because at 150 you have more time to perform more actions during the race, and that's why people race at 150cc. Now here is a chart showing how many bonus points get added to each of the first 15 actions in your combo at 150cc when you use a top shelf glider. It doesn't matter super, normal, or high-end, just a top shelf glider. And you can see that from action 16 and up, 45 points are going to be added to the bonus points for each further action in the combo. So if we go back to our example of the coin and the jump boost, the starting value for a coin action was 5 bonus points. Because of my level 3 high-end cart, that got multiplied by 2.3, that's 11.5. And if I perform that as part of a long combo, I add a 45-point combo bonus. So that makes the value 56.5, and the game always rounds up in your favor at the end of the final calculation. So you can see in the scoring summary that's shown as 57 for the coin action. Then again, for the jump boost, that had a starting value of 20 points, but because of my card I was using, it's worth 46 points, and if I perform it as part of a long combo, I can add the 45-point combo bonus once I get past the 15th action. 46 plus 45 adds up to 91. That's why it's shown having a value of 91 points in the action summary at the end of the race. Now the next thing that's added on is a bonus if you're entitled to it for your kart or glider special skills. So these are the possible kart skills: Dash Panel Plus, Jump Boost Plus, Mini Turbo Plus, Slipstream Plus, and Rocket Start Plus. And you can see, depending on if your kart is normal, super, or high-end, when you perform one of those actions that's listed in each of the kart's profiles, that specific action, every time you perform it throughout the race, will have a certain amount of points added to it. For Rocket Start, you can only perform that once, because there's only one race start, so that's why that's shown as the highest value. Mini Turbos you can perform all the time, and in fact, that's the best way to keep combos down long sections where you don't have anything else to do to keep your combos. So Mini Turbos are only worth plus 4 points with a high-end kart versus a Rocket Start, which is worth 80 points. But if you do 20 Mini Turbos in a race, then you've earned the same value as doing a Rocket Start for 80 points. But all of these values are in the single or double digits. So even if you perform like 50 Mini Turbos in a race, that's still only going to be 200 points. And by the time that you're going for like thousands and thousands of points, between your base points, your finish points, your bonus points boost, that 200 points, plus give or take a little bit, is not going to make that big of an impact on your score. So even though people do get concerned about which kart special skills are the best to use on certain courses, like jump boost on a trick course, really the level, shelf, and base points of your kart are going to have more of an impact at the end of the day. These are the glider special skills, and again, they're all in the single or double digits, so even if you get a frenzy with like lots of mushrooms or lots of banana hits, and you get a couple hundred extra points, that's not going to be that big of a difference over a race where you're scoring thousands and thousands of points. So don't stress out too much about the glider special skills. The glider skills do also change your percentage chance of rolling each item, so that could be something beneficial. And one thing to note about the glider special skills is that Coin Plus only applies to single coins that you roll or to a single coin frenzy. It doesn't apply to coins on the track, and it doesn't apply to coins that you pick up from a coin box. So there's a limited extent, but it's nice to know the glider skills are there, and they do get added in at this point in the calculation. The overall calculation then is the bonus points you receive for each action is equal to the starting point value of that action multiplied by the kart multipliers based on the shelf and the level of your kart. And then that result has a combo bonus added to it. Then if it applies to that action, it would have a kart or glider skill bonus added to it. And finally, the game adds the bonus point boost. And you see that during the race, but it's then separated out into a separate line item in the scoring summary, so you don't see that reflected in the action by action list in the scoring summary, since it's shown as a separate item. So here's an example of how that works. Remember the coin and the jump boost action we were looking at earlier? Let's take a look during the race. The coin was worth 57 points because it's 56.5 rounded up on the action summary. But during the race, you can see that it shows 77 points, and that's because the 20 additional points are the bonus point component of the bonus points boost that we calculated earlier. For this set, we calculated a 40 point per action bonus points boost. Half of that, or 20 points, is added during the race. For that same reason, you'll see the jump boost is registered as 111 points during the race. So that's what it means that the bonus points boost is already included in the score you see added up during the race, even though it's written as a separate line item on the scoring summary at the end of the race. Now, neither of these actions received a kart or glider special skill bonus because my kart was Mini Turbo Plus and my glider was Super Horn Plus. But if you look carefully, you'll see there's a Mini Turbo that I perform in here, which has the same starting value as a coin, 5 points. But the Mini Turbo, instead of registering at 77, it registers at 81. And on the scoring summary, instead of 57, it would say 61. It's those 4 extra points coming from the Mini Turbo Plus kart skill bonus. And so it's not very much, it's 4 points every time you do a mini turbo, but it's nice to know that it's there and you can see it in the scores that are displayed. So that was bonus points, which is by far the most complex element of the scoring formula. Now let's end the video with a look at position points, which are the points that you earn when you finish the race. As the name suggests, position points depend on what position you finish in, 1st through 8th. They also depend on your player level and the CCs that you're racing at. So these values shown are for 150 cc, and it's a few hundred points less for 50 or 100 cc. So at player level 50, you'll earn 4,000 points for a first place finish. At player level 100, 5,000 points. At level 150, 6,000. And then if you can get up to level 300, which I don't think anyone has yet, then you'll earn 7,000 points for a first place finish. So you can see the increase from level 150 to level 300 is the same as it was for every 50 levels before that. So there's not this huge pressure to get to level 300, but you do still increase your finish points slightly as you continue to level up. In the examples in this video, I'm at player level 190, so the position points I earn for a first place finish are 6,400 position points, because it's 4/5 of the way between level 150 and level 200. Now these are the points you earn for finishing in first place. If you finish in 2nd through 8th, there's a multiplier that reduces them by a certain percentage. So a 2nd place finish, you multiply times 0.85. For a third place finish, you multiply times 0.75. You only get 3/4 of the value you see here. All the way down to 8th place, where I don't think it even lets you finish. It'll just cut you off when the driver in front of you crosses the line, and you'll get 20% of the full value of your position points. Now, those multipliers are very important, and you could maybe imagine they already would be multiplying the position points, but they're even more so because they multiply the component of the bonus points boost that gets added into your position points. Remember, half the bonus points boost was added to each action during the race, and the other half is added at the finish line, but you only get the full value of it if you finish in first. If you finish in second, it's also multiplied by 0.85, just like the position points, and so on. That's why it's so important to try and finish first in the race when you're going to go for your high score runs. So here are just 2 examples of scoring position points. The first is with this set that we've used earlier, Pauline, the head honcho, and the Silver Bells. They have a bonus points boost of 40 points per action, but if you take the bonus points boost and divide it in half, you're going to get the amount that's applied at the finish line, which is 20 points per action. And so when I cross the finish line in first place, I'm entitled to 6,400 position points based on my player level, but I'm also going to earn 118 times 20 because I completed 118 actions in the race. And 118 times 20 is going to be 2,360 points. Add that to 6,400, and that's how you get the 8,760 points that Pauline gets for the first place finish. On the scoring summary, the bonus points boost is shown on a separate line, but it's already added into the finish points you see displayed when you cross the finish line. Now let's look at an example of a second place finish, this time with Red Yoshi, the Red Turbo Yoshi, and the BBIA Parafoil. Because I finished this race second, I didn't get the full 6,400 points corresponding to my player level. Instead, I only got 85% of that amount because the second place multiplier is 0.85. So you can see that my position points were only 5,440 position points because that's 85% of 6,400. I still get to add a component of the bonus points boost, just not as high as if I had finished first place. So I'm not going to show you the calculation, but the bonus points boost per action for this combination is 61.5. Half of that is applied during the race to each action, and the other half, which is 30.75 points per action, gets applied if you finish in first at the finish line. Well, let's see what that would be. I performed 112 actions in the race, so 112 times 30.75, I did this earlier, multiplies to 3,444 points of bonus points boost. That would be if I finished in first place, but because I finished in second, I have to multiply that times 0.85. So when I multiply that, it comes out to 2,927.4, and since the game always rounds in your favor, it's going to round that to 2,928. Add those together, and you get the final value of 8,368 shown in the video. Now, one thing to notice is a second place finish is worth about 1,000 points less, 5,440, than a first place finish, 6,400. But Yoshi scored only 300 or 400 points less with 8,368 than Pauline with 8,760. So why is that? Well, that's because some of it's made up for by the fact that Yoshi's set is at a higher level, levels 5, 6, and 7, than Pauline's set, levels 4, 3, and 3. And so therefore, Yoshi has a higher bonus points boost. And even with a second place finish, that bonus points boost was worth more than Pauline's was. So you can score higher by using high-level supers and normals than by using low-level high-ends in a lot of cases. And that's why it's so important to pick your highest level drivers, karts, and gliders when you're on the selection screen. There will be another video planned for this Mario Kart Tour 101 series about which driver, kart, or glider should I select to talk more about that. But that's it. That's how the scoring system works in Mario Kart Tour. So remember, you've got those 3 types of points, and those are what are added together to get your race score. First, base points. That's why it's important to raise the base points of your items as high as possible. Second, bonus points. That's why it's important to perform as many actions as you can during a race and to string them together into long combos, which give you a significant portion of the bonus points. And third, position points, and that's why it's important to finish first on your high score runs, because then you can maximize the amount of points that get added to your score at the end of the race. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it informative. Don't forget to leave a like if you did, and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to know about that you think would make a fun and informative Mario Kart Tour video. Until next time, keep racing, and may the frenzies be forever in your favor. Am I allowed to say that?